An old woman sets out to fulfill her husband's final wish. But in the heart of a blizzard, she stumbles into something far more terrifying. A secret soaked in blood, a girl begging to be saved, and a couple willing to kill to survive. This is Dead of Winter, 2025. In the frozen wastelands of Minnesota, an old woman named Barb sits alone in her dim cabin, staring at her husband's ashes. She looks at an old photograph of the two of them together, the day they first met, and a faint smile crosses her face. Then, with a heavy heart, she packs a few essentials into her truck, pins that old photo to the dashboard, and drives off through the endless frozen roads to fulfill her husband's last wish: to scatter his ashes in the frozen lake where their love story began. On the radio, the weather department warns people not to travel due to an approaching blizzard, but Barb ignores the warning and continues driving. Soon, snow starts piling up on her truck and visibility drops. She stops in an open area, pulls out a map, and tries to find her way to the lake, but she's completely lost. Helplessly in the freezing cold and unsure where to go next.
Suddenly, a strange noise echoed through the storm, pulling Barb's attention. Driven by curiosity, she followed the sound until an isolated cabin appeared through the snow. Outside, an old man was chopping wood, his movements slow and heavy in the cold. As Barb approached, she noticed bloodstains scattered across the snow. The man looked up sharply, startled by her sudden presence, his eyes filled with suspicion. Barb gave a polite smile and said she was only looking for directions to the lake. After a pause, the man told her it was just beyond the hill. Before leaving, she pointed at the blood on the ground and asked if he was hurt. The man gave a dry chuckle and said it was just deer blood. But the way he said it sent a quiet chill down her spine. Then, after a long, cold drive, she finally reaches the frozen lake, the place she once shared with her husband. Tears fill her eyes as memories return. She kneels to scatter his ashes, when suddenly a gunshot echoes across the silent lake. Barb ducks behind her truck, heart pounding. She spots a young woman running frantically across the snow, with the same old man chasing her, gun in hand. He yells, "Try to run again and I'll kill you," and forces her back toward the cabin. Barb tries calling the police, but there's no signal. As soon as they disappear, she hurriedly gathers her things and tries to drive away, but her truck gets stuck in the snow. Unable to escape, Barb decides to go back and find out what's happening. Hiding behind the cabin, she sees the old man's truck leaving. Seizing the chance, she sneaks closer and peers through a basement window, and is shocked to see the young woman tied up, her mouth taped shut. Barb whispers, "Are you alone?" The girl nods fearfully. 2 more vehicles arrived, their headlights slicing through the storm. The old man had returned, this time with his wife, a stern, cold-eyed woman gripping a gun. Hidden behind a snowbank, Barb listened to their tense voices and felt her blood run cold. From their words, she understood the horrifying truth. The couple had kidnapped the young woman and now planned to kill her. She traced a quick message on the frosted window: "I'm here, I won't leave you," then ran back to her truck, trying to think of a way to save the girl. Moments later, the wife stepped outside and noticed blood dripping from her nose. She froze. A glove lay in the snow, one that wasn't theirs. Her gaze lifted to the window, where Barb's message still glowed faintly through the frost. Her face twisted with rage. She demanded to know who had been there. The old man finally admitted that a woman had stopped by earlier, asking for directions to the lake. The wife's voice turned sharp with panic. If that woman had seen anything, they were finished. She grabbed her gun and ordered her husband to drive to the lake, to find Barb and silence her. But Barb is already waiting there. She uses her husband's old ice fishing shed as bait, setting a trap. When the old man approaches, the ice beneath him collapses and he plunges into the freezing water, a trap Barb had prepared. The wife drags him out, shivering, while Barb sneaks back to the cabin, breaks into the basement, and finds the girl chained with a padlock. "I'll get you out," Barb whispers. She promises to save her, then turns on the water taps upstairs to flood the house and destroy the couple's supplies. As she tries to escape, the wife returns and shoots Barb, grazing her arm. Barb manages to flee into the blizzard. When the couple comes back inside, they find the cabin flooded, their supplies soaked. The girl in the basement is now freezing as water fills the floor. The old man, still drenched and weak, begins trembling uncontrollably from the cold.
Meanwhile, Barb sat in her truck, bleeding, but alive.
As she wrapped her wound, she realized her husband's ring was missing. Panicked, she rushes back to the frozen hole, but it's not there. Then she spots the old man's gun lying nearby. Determined, she says to herself, "I have to save that girl," and heads back to the cabin. Back in the cabin, the old man's wife is frustrated that he had lost his gun and forces him to prepare for the operation, revealing their gruesome plan. They intend to cut out the kidnapped girl's liver for a transplant, as the wife is terminally ill. Barb sneaks back into the cabin. She digs the bullet out of her arm with a tool. After she treats her wounds, she breaks into the truck and finds a radio and calls for help, saying, "2 suspects have kidnapped a girl. Please send help." Before Barb could finish the radio call, the old man lunged at her from behind. She fought back fiercely, grabbing an axe and slashing his leg. The man fell to the ground, clutching his wound. He confessed that his wife made him do it. She was dying and needed a transplant. His voice trembled as he reached into his pocket and pulled out Barb's wedding ring. He told her he had found it in the cabin. Barb stared at it, steadied herself, and told him quietly that if he truly wanted to make things right, he should drive to town, call the police, and then get medical help. The man nodded weakly and limped into the snowstorm. Moments later, his wife appears, furious that he left, accuses him of betrayal, and shoots him dead. Meanwhile, Barb sets her truck on fire near the lake, hoping the rising smoke will signal her location to rescuers. Her plan works. Soon, 2 police officers arrive. Barb tells them everything, and they follow her to the cabin. But before they can act, the old man's wife ambushes them, shooting both officers dead, and then turns her gun on Barb. Barb fires back, hitting her in the leg. Barb runs to the car and finds the old man's lifeless body inside. Heartbroken, she hides behind the cabin as the deranged woman shoots wildly, collapsing the roof onto Barb, knocking her unconscious. When Barb awakens, she's tied up in the basement alongside the kidnapped girl, whose name is revealed to be Leah. Barb manages to unlock her cuffs, frees herself, and together they search for a way out. Just as they find a back door, the wife spots them and locks it again. The next morning, the woman drags Barb and Leah to the frozen lake, where a makeshift medical tent stands. Inside are surgical tools and a liver transplant kit. The woman coldly announces her plan to remove Leah's liver and transplant it into herself. Barb begs her to take hers instead, but the woman sneers, "Your body's useless now." As she forces Leah onto the table, Barb secretly wraps the tape loosely and slips a metal pin into Leah's hand. "When the time comes, use this," she whispers. Then the woman shoots Barb and turns to prepare the surgery. But Barb rises again, wounded yet defiant, and attacks with a pair of scissors. A brutal fight breaks out. A lantern topples, setting the tent ablaze. Both women tumble outside, struggling for the gun. The wife gets hold of it, only to realize it's out of bullets. In a final act of madness, she drags Barb toward the same frozen hole. Meanwhile, Leah, bleeding and desperate, cuts her tape with the pin and escapes from the burning tent. Seeing Barb in danger, she rushes to help, and in one last, selfless act, Barb handcuffs the woman to herself and pulls them both into the icy water. Leah reaches the hole, screaming for Barb, but it's too late. Beneath the frozen surface, Barb opens her husband's urn, letting his ashes drift peacefully into the lake. She fulfills his last wish and gives her own life to save another. As the storm clears, Leah finds Barb's old photograph buried in the snow, the one of her and her husband smiling by this very lake years ago. She holds it close and walks slowly into the endless white horizon. The film ends with that beautiful, frozen moment from the past. Young Barb and her husband, laughing together on the ice, their love forever preserved in time.
Please like, comment, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.